Queer News and Journalism is a Gay 45 original podcast published every week on Thursdays, where we come together to comment on the topics in the weekly queer news published by our newsletter, The Nine. Subscribe on gay45.com to get the latest news every week. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're diving into the latest Gay 45 digest. It's quite a stack of news from all over the globe: politics, culture, justice, the lot. Our job here really is to look past the single headlines, try and find the threads connecting them, and figure out, what's the bigger picture for queer communities right now.
Yeah, and if you look across the Gay 45 this week, what really jumps out is this stark contradiction. On one hand, we're seeing these incredible moments of high visibility, like historic political wins, particularly in Western democracies. But then right alongside that, the sources are showing us some really sharp reminders of, persistent and even escalating threats. We really need to dig into that duality.
Absolutely. That tension, that explosive visibility you mentioned feels like the perfect place to start.
Yeah.
Let's get into segment one, political breakthroughs. And, the biggest headline has to be the Netherlands, right?
Right.
Rob Jetten, he's only 38, set to become the country's youngest and its first openly gay prime minister.
Yeah.
That's genuinely massive, historic.
It really is. And a crucial detail here, it's not just that he won, but sort of how he won. He represents D66, which is, the main Dutch center-left liberal party. But his victory wasn't just based on the usual progressive talking points. He seems to have very deliberately rebranded himself more as an optimistic reformer, proving he could tackle these huge domestic issues that, frankly, affect everyone.
Yeah, I saw that in the Gay 45 coverage. He really shifted focus, didn't he? Proposing, 10 new towns to deal with the housing crisis, and even taking a tougher stance on asylum procedures for non-EU applicants.
Exactly, which, it suggests that the successful progressive political model, maybe, at least in the current European climate, needs this blend. You have the progressive social values, but you also need pragmatic, maybe even traditionally conservative-sounding solutions for these big societal problems like housing and immigration. It seems like an effective way to counter the populist right.
But doesn't that, run the risk of maybe alienating some of his core progressive supporters? Is it a win for pure progressive politics, or is it more a win for pragmatism that maybe needs a bit of dilution?
Well, that's a really important question, isn't it, about leadership? What's interesting is Jetten also took a very strong line against the far-right populist Geert Wilders. He actually accused Wilders of hijacking Dutch identity. So he's claiming that national identity while embodying progressive change. He's basically arguing, our progressive values are the Dutch identity now. That's a pretty powerful move, I think.
Interesting framing. Okay, so shifting continents now, we see a different kind of progressive power really gaining ground over in the U.S., specifically Zohran Mamdani in New York.
Yes, and this is a huge symbolic victory in America's largest city. Mamdani, who's a Democratic socialist, a strong LGBTQ rights advocate, he's only 33. And he's become the first openly socialist mayor in New York City's modern history. That's quite something.
His platform seemed really laser-focused on systemic change, didn't it? All about affordability, rent control, more support for migrants, police reform. It felt less about personality and more about, policy urgency.
Definitely. And what's undeniable is in the message New Yorkers seem to have sent. When Mamdani gave his victory speech, he said New Yorkers chose care over fear. After years of arguments over budgets, austerity talk, rising costs, the biggest city in the U.S. picked a candidate who's clearly prioritizing social welfare and big reforms over, say, cutting back. It suggests a growing hunger for fundamental change, maybe.
It really does speak volumes, doesn't it? That political identity, whether you're the first openly gay PM in the Netherlands or the first openly socialist mayor of New York, is now translating into real high-level political power around the world. But like you said at the start, that power doesn't automatically shield the community from other kinds of threats. Which takes us straight into segment two, these stark economic and cultural pressures, particularly in Europe.
And this is where that feeling of celebration from the political wins it gets complicated by financial reality. We absolutely have to talk about the closure of Schwooss in Berlin, a truly landmark queer nightclub. It had been running for nearly 48 years.
Oh, that news is just heartbreaking. Founded back in 1977 as the Schwulen Zentrum, literally the gay center. It wasn't just a club, it was an institution, part of history. To think it's gone, just like that.
And this closure, it's not just, bad luck financially. It feels like a symptom of these bigger global trends. Urban hypergentrification, inflation hitting non-commercial cultural places really hard. Schwoods filed for insolvency. The Gay 45 mentions soaring rent, inflation. They were facing these massive monthly deficits, reportedly somewhere between 30,000 and 60,000 euros a month.
Wow.
Yeah, for a cultural nonprofit in a major city like Berlin, that's completely unsustainable.
It really highlights how economic threats can directly target the actual infrastructure of a community, doesn't it? These are the places where people organize, where history is shared, where younger people find connection. That final party name, last cheers, queers. It's so defiant, but also incredibly sad. Almost 5 decades wiped out.
It's devastating when these crucial physical spaces are lost, but, this loss also contrasts pretty sharply with the resilience the community shows through other means, through culture, which the Gay 45 also highlights. We're seeing intellectual and artistic resistance kind of pushing back.
That's true. That's where we get some more inspiring news. Like the openly gay author and comedian Habe Kerkeling getting the Bavarian Book Prize Honorary Award.
Yes. And his words really hit home against that backdrop of economic anxiety. He called literature a bulwark of democracy. It's such a powerful statement. It suggests that even if physical places like clubs are under threat, the ideas, the stories, the narratives, they can't be gentrified or shut down in the same way.
That same feeling was really clear at the Queer Literature Festival in Munich, too, wasn't it? A 2-day event focused entirely on diversity and resistance. It felt like more than just readings. It felt like a political act.
Absolutely. It directly connected queer art to survival, both historical and contemporary. They showcased Miku Sophie Kummel's novel about love during the rise of National Socialism, a stark reminder of past dangers, but then also featured really contemporary work like Evan Huger Tapist exploring masculinity and gender transition in Sin Penis Real. Are penises real?
And crucially, the festival also spotlighted the effort to expand access through translation, making fundamental works like Leslie Feinberg's Stonebush Blues available more widely. It's like building an archive, a canon of resistance.
Yeah, if you connect that to the bigger picture, it shows this interesting dynamic. While market forces might be dismantling some historical social infrastructure like Schuetze, at the same time, curators and writers are actively building this intellectual and artistic infrastructure, making sure the legacy and the struggle carry on.
And speaking of legacy, Berlin itself seems to be doubling down on its own history of freedom with that new exhibition, Berlin Sex Spaces, at the Berlin Sex Museum.
Right. This sounds fascinating. A deep dive into the city's often overlooked history of sex-positive spaces. It runs until November 2025, so plenty of time to see it. And the scope is amazing, from those legendary queer bars of the 1920s right up to modern cruising spots and dark rooms. The curatorial team apparently has serious expertise, covering everything from sex work history to kink ethics. It feels like a real celebration of queer sexuality and the spaces that allowed it to flourish, even as those kinds of spaces face new threats today.
Okay, so we've got the political highs, the cultural fight back against economic lows. Now we have to pivot to segment 3. And this is the extremely grim side.
Yeah.
Global safety, crime, and terror. We have to start with that really alarming domestic terror plot uncovered in suburban Detroit.
Yeah, this is possibly the most sobering story in the Gay 45 this week. 2 young men, Mohammed Ali and Majid Mahmoud, both actually under the legal drinking age, charged with terrorism-related offenses. They allegedly scouted LGBTQ+ bars. The intent seems horrifyingly clear and lethal.
And the arsenal they reportedly had. It's terrifying. AR-style rifles, handguns, over 1,600 rounds of ammunition. The level of planning is just chilling. Especially that detail from investigators that the pair were apparently inspired by Islamic State ideology and used code words like pumpkins for their planned Halloween attack in encrypted chats.
It really forces us to confront a critical question. Is this kind of thing domestically inspired terror, fueled by hate ideology, often planned online, becoming, a more common tactic now, compared to, say, state violence or just random street crime?
It certainly points to a horrifying level of organized, premeditated violence within the U.S., where individuals seem to be radicalized by ideologies, foreign or domestic, to specifically target visible queer spaces.
Absolutely. It hammers home the point that high-profile political wins and cultural acceptance can, and clearly do, coexist with escalating, targeted, lethal violence. That visibility we talked about, acting as a lightning rod, it's undeniable here.
Switching gears within justice, but still globally, we saw a different kind of outcome. Mixed, maybe, but ultimately positive in Cameroon. 2 LGBTQ truck drivers, Mojo and Asa, were released. They'd been held for 8 months in prison without trial.
Yeah, and this story really throws a spotlight on the economic aspect of oppression in some parts of the world. They were arrested back in January for alleged same-sex activity, which could mean up to 5 years in prison there. But the release wasn't because charges were dropped or anything. It only happened after international donations over $6,000 were raised to cover some kind of payment demanded by a local court.
So freedom essentially had a price tag. You get arrested just for existing, held illegally, and then you're basically ransomed back into the community. It's just, it lays bare the horrific injustice. Aces, quote, summed it up perfectly. They treat us like criminals, but we didn't do anything.
Exactly. And the injustice is compounded, isn't it? Because even when the community heroically pulls together $6,000, that doesn't undo the 8 months they lost in detention or change the underlying laws that put them there in the first place.
And finally, in this section, we have to cover the truly tragic story from Colombia. The targeted violence and the subsequent arrest and the killing of the UK scientist, Alessandro Coatti.
This one really underscores the risks that can exist even in digital spaces, especially using dating apps in certain contexts globally. Coatti was apparently lured to his death via Grindr by a gang, it seems, whose main goal was just to steal his bank details.
Just awful. His dismembered remains were found earlier this year. The suspect, Uber Itilvio Torres Garcia, was arrested after being caught on CCTV walking with Coatti. It brings that harsh reality of violence, purely motivated by financial gain, right into these queer digital connection spaces.
And while an arrest is, a step towards some kind of justice, the family statement that it brought them no closure really speaks volumes about the depth of the trauma. It's just a painful, painful reminder that even an interaction that seems completely innocuous online can sometimes mask lethal danger.
That is, a truly horrific set of global realities we just walked through. It really reminds us why that resilience, that connection, that intellectual inspiration we talked about earlier is so vital. So it feels fitting then to turn to the cultural corner of the Gay 45, see how people are finding inspiration and maybe fighting back through art.
Yes, we definitely need that moment of beauty and resistance. Okay, starting with film, the Gay 45 recommends Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Oh, it's visually stunning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every single frame just burns with this restrained desire, all candlelight and windblown cliffs. Why do you think this film feels particularly relevant right now? Does that focus on hidden desire resonate?
I think it absolutely does. It's fundamentally a story about creating art under constraint, about observing and being observed, which mirrors some of that cultural resistance we discussed in Berlin, right? It's an exercise in seeing and being seen, which feels incredibly relevant in a time when visibility itself is both celebrated and, as we've seen, intensely targeted.
Makes sense. Okay, for reading, the recommendation is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone.
Oh, this book is just lyrical brilliance. It starts as this correspondence between two rival agents, red and blue, fighting across collapsing timelines. But it gradually morphs into this incredibly intimate, high-stakes love story told entirely through coded messages, poetry, buried artifacts. It's really a love letter to language itself and to complexity.
Sounds amazing. A perfect recommendation for anyone listening who loves layers of meaning and the idea that just communicating can be an act of defiance and connection.
Exactly. And finally, for music, we have the St. Petersburg collective Short Paris and their album Pasca.
Yes. Art punk. Really compelling, really daring stuff. The Gay 45 highlights how they kind of play with masculinity and queer aesthetics. And they do it in a political context, Russia, where those kinds of gestures still feel like they carry real weight, real potency. It's loud, it's defiant, and honestly, deeply thrilling music.
Yeah, it speaks directly to that theme running through our whole deep dive today, doesn't it? Using cultural expression as an active, sometimes confrontational tool, especially in places where personal identity might be suppressed or even criminalized.
So if we try and synthesize everything we've pulled from the Gay 45 today, from the political heights in The Hague and New York to the cultural struggles in Berlin, the awful violence in Detroit and Colombia, the injustice in Cameroon, what does this duality ultimately tell us?
Well, we've definitely seen this explosive mix, haven't we? On one side, incredibly rapid political acceptance, gay prime minister, a socialist mayor in NYC, but coupled directly with these immediate stark dangers, organized terror plots aiming for mass casualties, the systematic economic failure of historic community spaces, and targeted murder across the globe.
Which really brings us to the critical question for you, the listener, to maybe mull over after this. Something we need to keep considering in the weeks ahead. When progress accelerates this fast, is all this heightened visibility acting mainly as a shield? Protecting communities, allowing for this political ascent? Or is it primarily acting as a lightning rod, attracting more focused, more organized, and maybe even more lethal hostility.
The fact that these major political gains and these extreme systemic dangers are happening at the exact same time means we can't afford to be complacent. We have to grapple with the complexity of what progress actually looks like right now.
It really feels like it's never been more important to stay informed about these global nuances, these connections.
Absolutely. Keep using this knowledge. Keep thinking critically about the ever-shifting landscape of the global queer conversation.
You can also listen to any of our articles. Visit gay45.com to read more quality journalism.